and hello and welcome to the Macquarie MBA career session. Many thanks for joining us, taking time out of work or home or possibly the Olympics to check into the session. Thanks for that. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to their culture, to their elders past, present and emerging. My name is Steve James. I'm the MBA course director and I also teach business strategy on the MBA program. I'm delighted to introduce our panel tonight. It's great to have them along. We have Paul Summers, our MBA Career Development Manager, with the hand just raised there. So Paul has an MBA himself and a very strong background in the industry, both in the for-profit and the not-for-profit sector. So great to have Paul with us. I'd also like to introduce Margot Wilson, the Chief Operating Officer of Hannover Re. And Margot finished her degree, her MBA in 2019, so about 2 or 3 years out from completion. Esther Holloway is a current student and a digital marketing consultant for Side Hustle and a current MBA student. So great to have you along, Esther, and your perspective, as well as Tim Butcher. Tim is the Senior Manager, Aviation Strategy and Stakeholder Relations for the Certis Group and is also a current MBA student. So it's excellent to have you along. Thanks, panel members, for giving up your time as well. And it's really helpful because you can provide that perspective as we focus here in this session on pre, during and post MBA matters. So that's really what we're addressing here. And as we work our way through a series of questions and just in a relaxed conversational style, please do not hesitate to post up any questions or queries that you might have in the Q&A box. And we will come to those questions toward the end of the session. We may only have 5 or 10 minutes to do so. And so that's the plan for the session. We just have a series of questions to work our way through and to get it that sort of authenticity from our panel, because really our panel members have either been through an MBA or are currently working through an MBA and juggling the various commitments in terms of work and family, and also have this fresh view on why would you undertake an MBA, because it is a big commitment. But just before we get to that, I'd like to just hear a bit more from my panel members. So if you could share just a little bit about your background and your current role. And if I'll start with you, Tim, on that question.
Certainly. Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. My name's Tim Butcher. And as Steve said, I'm about halfway through my MBA part-time level. My background, I was actually served in the military as a Army officer for just over a dozen years. And more recently, then transitioned and joined the Certis Group in Australia and working inside their aviation division at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Over to you, Esther. You're a bit quite on mute there, I think. I'm not sure. Volume up. Might be an audio problem at the moment, Esther. Yeah. Should we go to you, Margot, and then we'll come back to Esther. Margot, let's just your current role and a little bit on your background, Margot.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Wilson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Hannover Life Re Australasia. I've been in this role a bit over a year now. And in this role, I take care of our IT, our operations, underwriting, claims and projects teams. But prior to joining Hannover Re, who are a global reinsurer, in case you're wondering, I had a bit of a mixed skill set. I spent about 10 years in various versions of consulting, and then I've also spent some time in financial services and industry at Macquarie and NAB and AMP. That's me.
Thanks, Margot. We'll go to Paul and then we'll come back to you, Esther, and hopefully your audio will be okay. So over to you, Paul. Just a
Thanks
brief.
so much. Thanks so much, Stephen. Wonderful to see everyone here as well. And similar to Margot, I spent around 10 years in the management consulting domain, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Subsequent to that, I've spent 8 years at both Google and Groupon, more in the technology domain, both domestically and internationally. And overseas, I was fortuitous enough to be able to get my executive MBA over there as well. And the last 2 years I've spent in the public sector, of which I've spent 12 months with Steve and the team in terms of being the career development manager for all MBA students.
Thanks, Paul, and it's lovely to have you in working on the team. Esther, how are you going with your audio?
Are we any good now?
That's great.
Okay, good. So my name's Esther Holloway. I was a marketer for about 15 years, studying in New Zealand, and then I've been over in Sydney for about 10. And then, started my MBA about 4 years ago, just over halfway through now.
Thanks, Esther. So yeah, that's great. Great to get a bit more of a flavour from each of you. Thank you for that. Look, undertaking an MBA is without doubt, it's a big undertaking. It's a significant commitment. It's not an easy decision to make because you're really thinking about, I guess, things like return on investment. How will you actually get through an MBA given work and family commitments, and how does it fit into your life? So it's quite a bit to consider there in weighing it up. So I'm curious to hear from each of you as to when and more so how you went about making that decision to undertake an MBA at Macquarie. And can I start with you, Margot?
Sure. So I actually first started thinking about doing an MBA actually about 5 years into my career, which is going back a while now. It's probably about 2002. And had a look around at various master's programs at that point in time. I was in management consulting. It was kind of the thing to do. But it wasn't really the thing for me to do, which is what I kind of realized by looking at that kind of earlier in my career. So actually it wasn't until I came back to it around 2015, 2016. Obviously I had a chance to grow my professional career by then. And it really held a much stronger appeal because I'd started to dabble across a broad range of business topics. And I had a real sense, though, that while I had an opportunity to learn a great deal through my experience, it didn't quite all fit together. And I had this sense that there was more to it, and I could get more from actually formalizing my learning through an MBA. So that was probably the first big factor for me in deciding to look at an MBA. The second factor was around actually just where I was in my career. By that point, I'd had an opportunity to lead a number of different types of teams, but I did feel like I had reached a little bit of a plateau, and I was looking for the next opportunity or the next step and how I might go about doing that. And so again, my academic background was not in business, was not in any traditional business topic. So I have a BA, I have honours in philosophy, social and political theory. I did another master's also in philosophy and policy. So not a traditional business career. I work in financial services. So for me, it was also a chance to really get a strong credential that helped me professionally from a learning point of view, but also professionally from a credentialing point of view. And then I guess the final thing I was really looking for was that point about balance, which is how on earth do I find an MBA program that has enough flexibility in it that I'm not fully committed to evening classes, I'm not fully committed to online, I'm not fully committed to weekends, but actually I could flex between them depending on what my work life was like. And actually it was looking at those factors together and the program at Macquarie University that, that I was sitting where everyone else is sitting here tonight at an information session and, came through that and went, oh, okay, this is all falling into place for me now.
Thanks, Margot. That's really helpful. Over to you, Esther, and then to Tim.
Yeah, similar process. I just came along to an information session. A friend was studying an MBA at Macquarie, and it was similar in my career. That was kind of the way that you go if you want to advance. And my workplace was a multinational, so they supported doing an MBA. So I came to an information session, and I was just telling the guys before this that it took 6 years from that first information session until I signed up and actually started. So I came to the information session, learned about it. Similar, the flexibility was a big thing. I came, in my undergrad, it was 2 semesters a year, and that's quite not easy to do when you're also working. So that was a big thing that made me interested in doing Macquarie. And then I decided to do it a few years ago because I just really wanted to advance myself, get a bit of a different skill set and the confidence to do something a little bit more advanced in my career and feel like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, thanks, Esther. And that's a theme that I've heard in terms of that an MBA crystallizes and formalizes that work experience that you've already got, and it broadens that acumen and can take you to that next step. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Steve. Probably somewhat slightly different to the 2 ladies before me. I was actually in Lebanon at the time. I was doing a secondment with the United Nations, and I was working out how was I going to transition from the military. And I originally thought of the MBA as the platform to help me transition and build the bridge from essentially public sector government to private enterprise. Because I knew I had a lot of the soft skills, some of those more tangible business acumen skills I didn't have a good grasp on. So I viewed the MBA as my pathway to make that transition across. And a big part of that was about building my credibility and also giving probably reassurance to future employers of what a defence or military officer can do. Because there's some shadows and secrets sometimes that people don't quite know what we do. That being said, the reality was I didn't actually start my MBA journey until about a year and a half into my current employment. And I am really glad that I did wait, because it's allowed me to practically apply those skills from every subject. I can deploy that knowledge straight into the workplace. So for me, it was a transition platform, but it was about timing that at the right point.
Thanks, Tim. Much appreciated. Yeah, so the sort of traversing from where you've been to where you want to get to, and the MBA provides that bridge and that platform, as you said. So over to you, Paul. Just in terms of this theme, could you provide for our audience just some advice from a career perspective as to why you might undertake an MBA in that sort of career context?
Yeah, I think for me, now having worked with hundreds of students at the school, the thing that strikes me is it's really useful to think about the program in terms of realistically what it can provide you. And you've heard from Margot, Tim, and Esther, the motivations are very, very different for different people. And as much as Steve and I would love to give everyone a golden ticket to say, this is your winning lotto ticket and you will skyrocket to be a CEO tomorrow, et cetera, it's a very unrealistic expectation to necessarily have. If you have this view that I think our panelists here have, which is to say, I'm curious about life, I'm curious about learning, I really want to sharpen, crystallize, etc., a lot of different aspects of business, then I think the MBA is a wonderful opportunity for you. Secondarily, I would also say unequivocally to do, and it sounds slightly cliche, but to do what you are passionate about. And I love the fact that, for example, Margot was referencing the fact that she came from a philosophical background or a background in history. And if honestly your perspective is that that's what you're more passionate about and you want your career to follow that trajectory, then absolutely do not do an MBA, because an MBA is great for certain things, but then there are going to be other master's programs that are going to be potentially wonderful for you in different areas. So I think for me, if it is that you are curious about the world and curious about the way that business fits into that broader perspective, then I think an MBA can be absolutely wonderful. Please do not get sucked in by the hype of MBAs that I see oftentimes coming out of the US in particular, where they basically say you have to have an MBA, else you will never be able to move the next step in anything. That unequivocally is not the case. So I think it's really just being objective around what it is that the MBA can actually provide you. And just as importantly, what are you passionate about? And if it is business, then MBA can be a wonderful platform for you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's very illuminating as well. And I think, as you referred to, Margot, was sort of, you got to a certain point and then you were looking to take that next step. Can I maybe ask you to go to that, where you saw the MBA fitting in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually aligned with, I guess, what Paul was talking about. Well, the first time I looked at a master's program, I didn't have the passion for the business topics. You know, I was like, oh, it's not really, I could do it. Everyone tells me it's a good idea, but it wasn't something that I was interested in. But where if I fast forward to that time in 2015, 2016, I, found myself genuinely curious about going, oh, I really want to know a little bit more about, some of these financing models, or I want to be able to have a better conversation around some of the contracts that I was, now being asked to review and to participate in negotiation on. Or, I really want to be thoughtful about how I'm leading teams and what are some of the other ways that I can engage and be a better team leader. So I kind of had those questions and that interest. And so that was really the thing that had shifted for me. In terms of the plateau I mentioned, it was really about going, I was sort of looking around the business. Is there a role for me? What's my next role? Where could I go next? I had really supportive managers, but I just couldn't quite see where I would go next. And so I think the opportunity for me was, well, there are a whole bunch of different topics that I haven't spent a lot of time in. I hadn't ever had any exposure to marketing, as an example. I hadn't had a deep exposure to financing. I hadn't done any law at all. I'd done a bit of strategy, a bit of other different pieces. So really that chance to broaden out and actually explore that in a way that helped me go, well, actually, is that something I would like as part of my next career move or next role? It also provided that was quite interesting as well to me.
Thank you, Margot. That's great. Can I just move to another question, which is, there's a couple of dimensions to this particular question, but we are going through, as we know, endemic change in the workplace. Certainly with digital transformation sweeping through, and the way that we communicate and interact has been remade by that sort of transformation, structural change. So sometimes we can get caught up, and you might have mentioned it, Paul, in terms of the sizzle or the jazz or the outward-looking stuff of some MBAs that might be quite seductive, but it might be fads and fashions that come and go. I'm interested in what your experience on the panel in terms of the sort of the enduring skills that you're picking up as a current student. And Margot, for you completed a few years ago now, and I guess also for you, Paul. What do you see as the enduring skills that you've gleaned or picked up on your MBA journey, current or past, that have worked for you, that things that you can take into different contexts or situations? I might start again with you there, Margot, because you've got the sort of the more of the longer picture there. So, and then over to Esther after you, Margot.
Thanks, Steve. So I guess a couple of enduring pieces for me. The first was a really important lesson in diversity. And by diversity, I mean diversity of thinking and experiences. One of the things that you have an opportunity to do with an MBA is work with lots of different cohorts of people on different assignments as you go through the different topics. And sometimes you come across people that you know or you work with a couple of times, but most of the time you don't. And what was really surprising and interesting to me, and that I do continue to take forward actually most days, is to really make sure I'm genuinely listening and tapping into those diverse perspectives, and really understanding where people are coming from, because everyone does have their own story and background, educational background, cultural background, and there's just so much to be gained by remembering to actually ask what's happening for them from their perspective and how can you take that forward. So I think for me, that's one of the enduring lessons that I learned, really particularly actually in the MBA, that I take forward fairly regularly.
Thanks, Margot. Over to you, Esther.
I actually think that's very true. You work with people from all different companies, countries, and roles. In my lecture last night, we had somebody who works in high-end men's fashion, and she tells us her stories in relation to economics, which is really interesting. But we've also got a guy who trades whiskey in China, high wealth whiskey. So, they're two different stories, but we can relate them to the learning material. So I think that's really something I learned a lot from the MBA is everything's applied in the real world. We're applying everyone's workplaces, and most of the projects you're asked to look into your professional, personal experience of things, rather than using textbook case studies and things like that. So also in class, you can talk to, you're encouraged to talk in class and share your opinions rather than sort of a lecture style like in an undergrad when you sit in a lecture hall and you don't speak to anybody the whole time. So I think that's been the most interesting is what I've learned from my peers, not just in group projects, but just in class participation. And it's been a little harder on Zoom the last year. But I've been lucky. I was in Steve's class for 2 weekend blocks, and I still remember the people from there. There was one in consulting, there was one in not-for-profit. So there was one in technology. So I still remember the various, and there's a librarian, and that's really interesting, applying librarian to MBA content. So yeah, I think I've learned the most from my peers and just applying sort of the macro of their industries on the learnings.
Yeah, that richness from the diversity and that synergy that you get through communication and the listening skills as well. Tim, over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Steve. Similar to Esther, I think the diversity of students is a huge asset. All walks of life, all backgrounds, all industries. And when you do a lot of these group projects, it's really interesting because people, my experience so far is people actually don't want to do their own industry. They want to do something that's completely foreign to them. I'm doing a strategy subject at the moment. I've never had anything to do with mining companies. And we looked at the short, mid and long-term horizons for Whitehaven Coal with a group that had a medical specialist sales member, a lawyer, myself, and a banker. So very different perspectives. I think one of the big skill sets that I've picked up is really the critical thinking. And more specifically, when in my workplace, when I'm speaking to our leadership team, I can really understand what's driving their decisions or influencing them. So if it's a GM of HR or marketing and sales, I can understand what makes them tick more than I would have otherwise had I not done some of these subjects so far.
Thanks, Tim. Paul, your view. Do you have a view on this as well, Paul? Or
nothing further to add on that. I think that was beautifully described, and yeah, 100% agree with those sentiments.
Yeah. Look, thank you. I think there's sort of themes emerging across there, and I guess it's one of them is the soft skills and embracing diversity, and that skill. And it's often not the loudest person in the group, but it might be the quietest person that can bring people together, bring that diversity of input to reach a better solution or to harness an opportunity, whatever it might be in whatever discipline. But that's certainly key. And maybe we should have disclosed, Esther, that we were together in a strategy class recently for full disclosure. But I think strategy in particular, I'm biased because it's my field, but that really is an integrative discipline that you mentioned, Tim, and it's by bringing those different perspectives to a situation that you can often arrive at a much stronger solution that really picks up and understands, for example, the marketplace and the different dynamics among customers. So, Paul, I will come to you now with a particular question addressed to you, which is really around our career services and the work that you're doing since you started at Macquarie earlier last year. In terms of the career and the coaching and the integration in the curriculum and the other services, can you just sort of speak and outline what's available there for the Macquarie MBA?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I wanted to firstly briefly mention was what I'll call the MQBS careers philosophy, if you will. And I think if people are to look at historical career services, historical MBAs, and historical careers in general, it's very structured. It's very linear. It's very, call it 9 to 5, and it's a very transactional relationship where there is a fundamental belief that if you undertake X, you very specifically know what the output will be on the other side of that. And the philosophy, I guess, that I'm looking to embrace with the careers work with the MBA is acknowledging that the world is very, very messy. We live in a world where predictability is almost impossible. We live in a world where it's very hard to know where you might be in 6 months, let alone 6 years, let alone in the next decade. And your needs and your aspirations may very reasonably change a huge amount on a daily basis or a weekly basis or whatever the case might be. So the framework and the philosophy with which I'm wanting to embrace the careers work that I do is much more on what I'll call a lab type context, where we're experimenting, we're trying new things, we're giving ourselves realistic targets over a very short term period to be able to then think about how do we test this hypothesis that we have in relation to your career as quickly and meaningfully as possible. What we don't want is someone to be in a role for 10 years that they think was really, really good, and then actually realize that it wasn't their passion and it wasn't their interest, and it's actually what is going to drive them insane over the next maybe decade. And so this concept of being much more of a laboratory, being a testing ground for new things and new ways and new opportunities for you is something that I think is really different in terms of the Macquarie Business School experience. The second piece I'll briefly touch on, slightly more tangible, is the work that Steve and I have been doing and many, many other colleagues in regards to a career development plan framework that we do have. For everyone's story, there is always going to be a beginning and a middle part and an end. And what we wanted to acknowledge within this work that we're doing is that there's going to be, as part of your career planning and understanding where you want to go and what you want to do, there's going to be 3 elements to that. So the first is clarity, and that is really around thinking around who you are, what you bring to the table in terms of a team and organization. What are your key motivations? Where are you coming from in terms of the last 25, 30 years of your broader life and professional career? Secondarily, then we want people to be exploring. So you've been going maybe down a particular career path and trajectory for a certain amount of time, which is wonderful, but how can we use this experience and this opportunity to step change in a slightly different direction? And then the third part of that is really around the community of people who you either know or who you might need to know in the future. So that's something that Steve and I have incorporated in curriculum for 3 specific subjects that you will all be a part of. And people, if they want to, can potentially engage with that plan outside of the structure in the curriculum as well. So regardless if you're looking to make a change in the next 6 months or whether you're looking to make a change over the next 2-year period, we can beautifully accommodate you within this general framework. And so all of that to say, they're the main thematic elements with which we've been considering and working with a number of our peers. The second piece I would then just briefly add is to say there's a lot of supporting pieces to that equation as well. So we have an alumni of 100,000 people within the business school. Margot is one of 100,000, and you can see the tremendous value, I'm sure, that she can provide to many, many people that are out there. So tapping into alumni is absolutely mission critical. Secondarily, we have, for example, a global leadership program in the university, which is one of the best programs I've ever seen in terms of a university experience. You can actually do that with a number of other postgrad students. And that's actually something that upon successful completion, you'll actually have that recorded on your transcript. It's a beautiful program, a beautiful way to learn about the world and the many, many different perspectives that are out there, on top of then your MBA experience as well. And then finally, I'm actually providing one-to-one coaching to people at the moment in terms of executive coaching. So I've had the great privilege of doing that for the last 6 months, working with a number of fantastic people in terms of really thinking through what are the next great opportunities in their career. And Steve and I are actually very close to actually bringing on a couple of more coaches into the broader program, so we can really expand that offering even more broadly. So there's some of the elements that you'll certainly be a part of, amongst many, many, many others as part of the Macquarie MBA.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for that outline. And as you were talking, I was thinking about really, I mean, I do work in strategy and industry and a lot of work on organizational purpose, and also now starting to look at individual purpose. And Esther, you might remember that from strategy, that purpose to impact work. And so as you know, your opening points, Paul, around the uncertainty that we're working in our operating environments, no less with COVID-19 at play now, we just don't have predictability. And there's complexity as well. So I think that focus that you then got to around understanding your motivations and where you are and where you're trying to get to, for me, it resonates with that sense of individual purpose and really trying to work on that. And it's probably a life work, isn't it? To get clarity and specificity on that, to then help you make decisions about work and career. And I wondered if I could drop Margot, Esther, and Tim, you into this and see, I mean, how have you been navigating in terms of your pathway and where you've been, where you are now, where you're trying to get to? Have you been able to get some clarity there? Maybe starting with you, Tim, just around your sense of self and purpose, and how's that playing out for you?
Certainly. I've actually come across subjects that I didn't think I would enjoy, which has sparked interest. Strategy is something that I've loved doing in the military, and that's reinforced it doing the MBA and with the strategy subject, which is great. Equally, marketing was something that I had very little exposure to, and I absolutely loved it. So much so that we did I'll come back to an example. We did a case study where you develop a marketing plan. We looked at some companies in the Macquarie incubator. We partnered with them, went out to their site. They repurposed and upcycle clothing. We got on so well and enjoyed it so much that the marketing plan we built for this company, they've actually come back and are now a vendor for us in the largest airport in Australia. So it's sparked new interest for me, and it's reaffirmed what I do love.
Thanks, Tim. Esther, any thoughts? Because I think, Esther, you're thinking of some kind of a career pivot, perhaps. Pivot's the in word these days, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think Margot touched on it earlier, how once you start the MBA, you don't know what you don't know. So once you start it, you realize, and for me, I kind of had quite a few little moments when I did various courses that they interested me. And then when I got to one which was finance for me, I realized that that was really kind of my maybe my calling at this stage in life, my change. So, you know, but I didn't know that. And if I hadn't done the MBA, I probably would have just kept on doing my previous career, thinking that this was as good as it got. So that's been really interesting. And then for me, sort of Paul was talking before, Paul helps me. We touch base about once a month, and that's on the phone, but we also email all the time. And, you know, and we're kind of working through that journey, and to have all these resources available at Macquarie has been great. I contact my old lecturer who lectured me over a year ago. I still contact him with questions regarding certain, so that's sort of another thing is I forgot the question, sorry. So I'll wrap it up, but yeah, just the networking opportunities. I still talk to past peers that I've worked with. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Esther. Yeah, it's really just about your individual journey and how you're navigating through.
Yeah, so I guess if you're going to say that, yeah, I've just really found myself and my kind of energy doing the MBA. Yeah.
Thanks, Esther. Margot, how about you in terms of this?
Yeah, look, the MBA was Well, as I said to you, I kind of reached a bit of a plateau when I started the MBA, and but I kind of more or less thought, I kind of knew that the type of role I wanted to do, and was to continue to grow in my executive career in the company that I was at. It was kind of, if you'd asked me then, that's what I was planning to do, and my MBA was to give me a broader skill set to enable me to more effectively engage with boards, more effectively work with executive teams, and to be able to lead a part of the business. That's what I would have said to you in 2016. What was really interesting for me, and probably like Tim, I had a bit of a surprise subject, which actually ended up being law. And I remember sitting in the first lecture of law going, I don't know what this is. This is not going to work for me. And then as it turned out, and certainly through the efforts of an incredibly talented lecturer, actually connected to it, and then suddenly went, oh, I can use it for this, and I can use it for that, and this is fantastic. And I had that experience also with operations. And actually between those two, by the time I'd finished my MBA, while I didn't know what my next role was going to be, I was very clear that actually it wasn't for me about any executive role or even leading a business. It was actually very particularly about becoming a COO. And so I had that sense of purpose grounded in, to become Paul's words, some areas of passion. Yes, certainly, I didn't start from nothing. I had a career working in projects and driving change. So and I'd worked in line roles. So there's certainly some right context there, but the clarity that I had as I came through my MBA journey, and went, okay, that's the thing that I want to do. And I want to keep now building towards that. And I ended up being incredibly fortunate. It wasn't my next role after doing my MBA, but it was the one after that. And I got the call from the recruiter saying, hey, we've got this interesting role. Are you interested? And I was like, COO, yeah, that sounds good. Let's have that conversation. And it is, I think, again, to emphasize sort of some of Paul's comments about when you find that real connection to, something that you can get behind, and you find the purpose in, and you find the passion for the topic. I think that comes through in the way that you are able to contribute to the business or the organization that you're contributing to. And so for me, I think that's probably one of the other shifts for me from the 2016 me, to the 2021 me, in terms of clarity and purpose, and the role of the MBA in that.
Thanks, Margot. And I think one of the themes that's emerged across from the three of you, I think, and you kind of put your finger on there, Esther, in terms of you don't know what you don't know. And the MBA brings you into a really wide network of people from diverse industries, backgrounds, perspectives, public sector, for-profit, not-for-profit. So it's that mix. And then, as I think many of you mentioned, so Tim, sort of marketing strategy, and Esther, one of the particular lecturers, and then Margot with law, you're connecting to different disciplines right across, business functions, and finding out more about yourself, because we just don't know on our own, do we? So it's when we connect with others and with other disciplines. And I think that the MBA, being that generalist program, gives you that opportunity, and just gives you that sort of network connection that helps you understand yourself, I think. So that sort of gets you along the way. My next question is just for you, Margot, and you might already have picked up on a bit of this in your responses already, but it's this is, what was life like? What is life like after you've completed your MBA? Do you think you need to get straight into a PhD program? I wouldn't suggest that. But what's changed for you professionally and personally in terms of having an MBA to your name? You've got that credential. You're now 2 year or 3 years on from that. So anything that comes to mind, Margot?
Look, the biggest thing, I guess, beyond the story I just shared in terms of my career, journey, is actually about confidence, and I think that's another one of those really important, enduring characteristics for me. I had an opportunity. I'd worked with finance teams. I work in life insurance, so I'd worked with actuaries, but getting the grounding and the base in that really gave me the confidence to engage much more directly and much more effectively in those conversations. And that is absolutely one of the things that has contributed to my, continuing growth and the contribution that I can make in the business that I work in. So I think that the biggest, post MBA thing is, and I still come back to it, and it's a question that people have asked me before, is like, do you ever use that stuff? Like, yes, actually I do. Like any of the people I work with in my business, I'll talk about, persuasive appeals, which is one of the things I learned about in rhetoric and persuasion, about how to structure up a really effective piece of communication, whether that's for a presentation or a negotiation, or, I'll talk about, continuous improvement and actually how that plays out over a 10-year journey, which was one of the things that Rod Lopez, who was at my lecture in operations, he was able to talk about, the pacing of change and actually how you drive consistent, output year on year on year, and how you drive innovation through that. And I refer to those things actually pretty regularly. So I definitely feel like there's an enduring impact from the MBA. Certainly personally for me, around my confidence in engaging in the topics, but actually the content as well. These are great frameworks and tools, and you get to learn how to apply them, and you can keep applying them and adapting, which, I think is the other thing for me that's important. Paul, you called out also, uncertain times. So being able to adapt your toolkit to whatever the world throws at you is also really important. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Margot. And I think it's, as you're saying, it gets you into the conversation. It gives you that confidence. And I think it's courage and it's voice as well. And that's what I admire when I'm working with MBA students, is that voice, having that voice. I mean, Esther, you were fantastic in the strategy class because you just provided that input and you stepped into the breach. And that's leadership as well. It's stepping in and taking a risk and making that contribution. And I think the MBA, as all of you have picked up, gives you that strength, that crystallizes that knowledge, it formalizes the knowledge that you have, and it gets you into, with business language, right across finance, accounting, marketing, strategy, leadership, operations. You're in those conversations and you're able to make a more strategic contribution at work. So that's certainly what I pick up from my experience in teaching and working with MBA. So thank you for that, Margot. I've got our last of our formal questions, and I can see that those in the audience, many thanks for your Q&A questions coming up. I'm not counting 17, so we'll come to those shortly. But in terms of a final question for those of you here on our panel, what is the top tip you would want to share with prospective students? That's quite an open question, isn't it? What's your single piece of advice, or somewhere in the top 3 advice that you would share for someone contemplating an MBA? And I'll start with you, Tim, on that.
Certainly. I'd say just do your research. There's a lot of providers out there on the full spectrum. I can't speak highly enough about Macquarie, but equally there was some close competitors. And just understanding what you want from it. Is it the flexibility of learning? Is it you want intense block periods where if you're a shift worker, you can get away for a Friday to Monday? Or do you want a low touch program where it's purely online? Understand what's important to you. One of the things that drew me to Macquarie was the flexibility in campuses. So having a CBD campus and a Macquarie campus was appealing. So I think understanding what my critical factors were, and then I scored the different providers against that.
That's quite rational. Thanks, Tim. That's helpful. Cheers. Esther.
Yeah, I just think don't waste the opportunity. If you do decide to come to do an MBA anywhere, make the most of everything that's available. So all your peers that you're going to meet, get to know them, make sure you connect with them, touch base with them, because they'll be your network. So they'll help you in the future. And, clubs and societies, all the things that are on offer with the university, they're available to you as a MGSM student. If you're asked to go out for drinks after class, try and talk in class. Just, make the most of the opportunity, because it's, for most of us, it's probably the last time we'll ever be a student again. And so, it goes faster than you think. So yeah, I'm on the homeward stretch. So, I'm feeling a bit nostalgic about it. I don't know. I think it'll be nice to have some free time at the end, but it'll be a bit sad as well, not having kind of that kind of hobby to do.
We could always find something else for you, Esther. I'm sure we could get you into a PhD program, definitely. But hey, look, that's a great point, because I think talking it out it's really how you learn. It's by talking your thoughts is how you develop your thoughts, and it's that sort of iteration and just stepping into that void and taking a chance and sharing your view. And the more you do that, again, in terms of strategy, the more you talk strategy, the better are you able to articulate, communicate it, and then walk it, because you're really sharp on what you're trying to achieve. So that's a great point. Thank you, Esther. And over to you, Margot.
Well, Tim and Esther covered off my first 2 points, so I'm going to have to go to point number 3. So I think in addition to be clear about know your why and then make the most of it, which is sort of where my first 2. I think also be thoughtful about the people in your world, and how to involve them in this conversation as well, because you are going to be dedicating some time and some energy to this, and that means that you might have to step out of other activities, or you might have to get up a bit earlier or stay up a bit later, or whatever it is that you need to do that works for you. And I think the people I know who shared that with whoever's in their world, really that felt supportive, and those key people were kind of on the journey with them, and I think that makes the world of difference, because there is always going to be a bit of give and take, because you do have to dedicate some time and effort to get the value out of your MBA. So I think that'd be my third top tip, is to connect with those people in your world, whoever they are, and bring them along the journey too.
Yeah, thanks, Margot. That's a key point. It's kind of, there's a support team, isn't there? That's key to you. But I'm always impressed by just how smart MBA students are at getting things done, and because you're so busy, but you become you're very strategic and selective in what you focus on, how you use your time, how you manage your time. So it's really impressive. And it's kind of like when you get busy, you do get a lot done and a lot achieved. So, and I do, to your point, Esther, it's a little bit, when you finish the MBA, you'll know this, Margaret, there's a bit of a void there in a way, somewhat. So that's a fair point. Paul, did you have anything to add in here?
Yeah, maybe just a super quick one as a final tip, if you will. Regardless of whichever school or program you end up going with globally, I just implore everyone to go somewhere that really cares about you as an individual. And I can honestly, hand on heart, say that I care about absolutely every student who I do work with. I know Steve, Eric Knight, the Executive Dean, Catherine Knight, for example, who joins us here today. The passion, I think, of the colleagues who I'm around is really something that drives me and motivates me on a regular basis. So if you're going to sessions and various other forums where you feel a little bit perhaps like you're getting treated like a number, so to speak, I think the Macquarie experience, as you've seen even from the passion of the current students and alumni and so on, I think there's a beautiful community that has been established over many, many years, and that I'm very keen to continue into the future. So I would honestly implore everyone to really make sure that you're getting from these potential providers the care and everything that is deserved to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Look, that brings us through the more formal questions for the panel. So I'm now having a look at the Q&A. We've got a range of questions here. One question is from Nipun to you, Tim, which is, if you're okay to answer this, what sort of strategy are you employing for recruitment if you're thinking post-MBA? Do you have any thoughts in terms of industry organisations that you're looking to move and to work with, or are you already on that pathway now?
I'm probably not that deep enough into the MBA to comment on that, but what I would say is that rather than looking outwards, I've been more looking inwards and what I can value add to the organisation I'm in. And I think that speaks to itself. Building my own reputation inside the business then echoes outwards. Whilst I've had some experience with recruitment companies, I think it's actually probably more going to be the network. That Esther, we were in the same class just before, and we speak semi-regularly. So I think it's probably going to be more leveraging the network for the jobs than it will be potentially the headhunters.
Thank you, Tim. I have a practical question, which is to the three of you, really, and to Esther and Tim, you're living it now. What is the time commitment per week, per subject, and sort of how are you balancing your work and other commitments with the study? So any thoughts on that? Because it will probably vary. Esther, how have you gone with that?
So I remember at one of these information sessions, I was told 20 hours a week would be there was a number that I was given by someone who was sitting in your seat, Steve, at the time. So they said 20 hours, and generally it's 4 hours of lectures a week, depending on how you structure it, because you could do a weekend block instead. And then that gives you 16 hours for reading or assignments. And I find that's usually a bit too much. At the end of a term or close to an assignment, yes, for sure, you'd be doing that kind of workload. But anyway, how you structure it, I guess you've got that flexibility. So if you know that you can never get off work before 6 p.m, then you're probably best to do a weekend course, because the weekday ones start at 6 p.m. And then also, yeah, it's a challenge. I often have to give up at least one day on the weekend to study. And then often every kind of strategic. I think someone mentioned that earlier, how you're strategic with your time. You know, I don't when I have a free moment to have a coffee or something, I'm usually looking at a textbook rather than Facebook. So yeah, you do have to kind of use the time you've got. I have 3 small children, so I think I saw a question in there about balancing it with family. So I've got a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. So yeah, it's pretty busy, but yeah, it's just about, you know, what do you want? If you want to just pass, you might not have to do as much as if you want to get the high distinctions. So it's about knowing, I think someone else said your why. Why are you doing it? And how much do you want to put in, and what do you want to get out of it?
Thanks, Esther. I think your young ones are providing your soundtrack at the moment in the background.
So yeah, they're having a great time.
That's right. Yeah, look, the official allocation is about 15 hours a week is what we say, but as you've noted, it varies, and you come around to assessment time. How about you, Tim? How are you handling the workloads, the hours?
I actually, for my very first subjects, term 3 last year, I was curious, so I actually mapped this out. Anyway, I spent 18 hours a week for marketing. I will caveat that it's certainly less than that now, because I just picked up so many efficiencies. I can get through the library quicker, and I've got templates built for certain things, but I think 15 is pretty reasonable. But then there's some subjects where I've just loved so much, and the group has loved so much, that we've caught up and even had drinks, like Zoom drinks or real drinks, outside of the study, because we had that much passion involved. So 15, I think, is a reasonable number.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's a good community of practice. I think that's my observation as well. Margot, can you remember?
I can remember, actually, not so much to the number of hours. So I'll definitely defer to Esther and Tim on that. But probably what I did learn, just to pick up on Tim's comment about efficiencies, I remember starting out and I was doing 1 subject per term. And about halfway through, I happened across a couple of colleagues of mine, and they're like, you can totally do 2 subjects a term. And I was like, oh no, I can't possibly be doing that. And then actually within about a term or so from that point, I actually took on 2 just to see what would happen. And I went, oh, actually, I need to be a bit more organized and I need to be a bit more efficient and structured. But, and again, back to the flexibility of the format, I would do a block class, which is over 2 weekends as it was then, and an evening class. And actually the ebb and flow of the peaks of when things were completely different. So I surprised myself and went, oh, look at that. But yeah, the first class, I just went, oh my gosh, I could never do more than one subject. But but 18 months in, I was comfortable doing 2. So I think you do learn that efficiency, and you kind of build your own rhythms around how to do that.
Thanks, Margot. Yeah, good point. We've got a question about the strategy unit in the MBA course. So I mean, Esther, you've done it recently, and I know Tim, you're perhaps doing it currently. But there's just a question about a bit more detail about what's covered in the strategy unit. So we have business strategy. Then we also have a capstone a little bit later, which is a synthesis of all of the key aspects of the MBA curriculum and an applied synthesis of that. But I wonder, Esther, can you just give a quick outline of what we cover in strategy?
Oh, I don't know if I'll do it justice to Steve.
Putting you on the spot.
Frameworks, which won't, as Margot said, once you know the frameworks, they don't date. So we learned a lot of the frameworks in terms of how you would assess the macro and the micro industry. And then what was really great about strategy is we had 3 past students, alumni, come in and talk about their experience with strategy decision making. And then we were able to use what they call the 4 lenses to analyze those businesses and write our report on them, and sort of how those people within their organization made decisions strategically. And then we went out and assessed in a group project, assessed the strategy of different companies and made recommendations on how they could proceed. So my group, we did Afterpay. And none of us worked in that industry, so it was really interesting to study that industry. Another group did the New Zealand accounting software. I've forgotten the name of it.
Xero. Yep.
Yeah, I can't remember the third group, sorry, but there were 3 groups and they did presentations, and we had to stand up in front of everyone and pretend that we were presenting to a board. So, you've got some real life, well, not real life, but some scenarios of real life experience from doing projects like that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Esther. I'm just we've only got a couple of minutes to go. We've got a question about the cost benefit of completing an MBA. Margot, are you able to give any, I mean, without being sort of getting to private details, but any broad concept generally of the cost benefit? I mean, sort of salary post-completion, the way it's regarded by employers generally. Any thoughts, Margot?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the first thing I would say, and align with some of, I think, Paul's comments, is like, if what you're looking for is, I'd like a 10K bump or a 20K bump in my salary, I know what I'll do, I'll go do an MBA, then don't do it, right? That's just, there are other ways to think about growing your salary and skill set other than an MBA. So, I think if you're looking at the cost benefit, it is about really getting clear about what it is you think you're getting, why you're doing it, and what you think you'll get out of it. There is a cost associated with it. If you haven't already, I'd suggest you chat to your current employer. Certainly my employer was very supportive of me participating, and many employers have study support type programs. So that's definitely an avenue to explore. I was very fortunate. I actually was able to participate in Macquarie's Women in MBA program. So that was another avenue of support. And I think it's also worth, if you haven't already, again, speaking to like a tax agent or an accountant, depending on your situation. You may find that some of the elements associated with your MBA as part of your professional development are tax deductible, but you need to get advice on that. But I think there's different ways of thinking about that cost. And then equally, I think there are very different ways of thinking about, therefore, well, what's the benefit I'm getting from it? And I think in the Australian context, I think an MBA is well regarded. And I think it's well regarded from a well regarded university. So, I think, employers obviously, go to university as well and talk to and see candidates from different universities. So have a sense of what that credential means and what does it mean for someone to have an MBA from a particular institution. So I think that's something to think about in terms of a benefit as well. So there's a lot of things to weigh up. But I'm probably going to come all the way back to some of Paul's opening comments and go, get super clear about why you want to do this. And if you feel the draw and the benefit, you will find the value from it, because it comes out in all sorts of different ways that you may not even be thinking about right now.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. A great point, Margot. And that does bring us to a close for this session. And I'd like to thank our panel, Margot, Esther, Tim, and Paul as our MBA Career Development Manager. Many thanks for your clear insights and experiences and sharing those with our group this evening. That's much appreciated. There are a number of questions we haven't got to in the Q&A, but we will try to get to those. And please note that in the chat box, there's a link to a one-to-one consultation session that you can take up. So please note that link in the chat box. And thanks again to our panel. And from my side and from Paul, we hope to see you on campus at some stage in the future. So it's good evening from all of us. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. That's wonderful. Cheers.